and welcome to the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the insights and analytics pros that you trust. I've so been looking forward to today's episode. It's going to be an amazing episode, and I'm honored to have Alisa Ben with us on the podcast today. Hi, Alisa.
Hi.
So let me tell you something about Alisa. She's currently the Senior Vice President and Head of Analytics at Canvas Worldwide, which is the world's second largest independent media agency and also the recipient of AdWeek's Breakthrough Media Agency of the Year in 2020. But she has actually spent the bulk of her career in the music industry in senior roles, really diverse roles in things like strategy and operations and insights and digital program management and all sorts of stuff for really, really cool organizations like Select Management, Rostrum Records, which is Wiz Khalifa and Mac Miller, rest in peace, Universal Music, Warner Music, Viacom, A&R, and the list goes on. But it's how she started her career while she was in college that has me super intrigued, and it will have you intrigued as well. And she's here to tell you all about it. So welcome to the show, Alisa.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm happy to have you here. So let's start with the analytics stuff. So how'd you get started in analytics, and why'd you stick around?
Well, as you mentioned, I spent the bulk of my career, about 19 years, in the music industry. I was living in New York at the time, and I worked for AOL Music. You all remember AOL, I hope. Your older audience does. So I was working at AOL Music, and the person that did some of the reporting had left the company. And they needed someone to do their ComScore monthly. It came out monthly, and I raised my hand and said, I'll do it, because I wanted, was motivated. I wanted more responsibility. No idea what ComScore was at the time. No idea what a metric was. Hits, yeah, I knew what hits were back in the day. Both a hit in music and a hit in like digital analytics. But
right.
So I took that on because it went to like the major executives at AOL Music. And I was like, man, you know what? Metrics equals money here. Okay, I should know a lot about it, because when I have that information, that's how I'm more employable.
Right.
So I took that on and I started understanding it. And there was a position actually at MTV in their digital analytics department. And I went to work there. And that was sort of my first entrance from marketing, editorial, creative music into I've always been analytical. Like, I bug my mom all the time with whys. I still do it, and I'm 43 years old. And she's like, haven't you learned? You're never gonna know all the whys, the answers to whys. But and I gotta say, it was a steep learning curve for me. I remember, how it was one thing to do the reporting and, here's sort of some patterns that I'm seeing. But there's the other side of it, which is very technical, which I think people don't understand, that data is actually very technical as well.
Right.
And to understand, to make sure you have the data integrity and understand how data even gets into a particular platform. I didn't know any of that. So MTV was really my training ground for that.
Cool.
And I learned so much there. I went home every day with my head hurting. There was so much to learn, but I'm glad that I did. And that's, kind of how I got my start. And then I, got to do analytics with music companies. It was at MTV. I had always wanted to work for MTV my whole life. Huge Madonna fan. I'll never forget watching her. And here I was working for Judy McGrath. I mean, not directly, of course, but there I was, and I was doing analytics, and I sort of parlayed that at Warner into Universal. And now, I do it for advertising agencies, particularly Canvas.
Yeah, it's
been
cool.
Interesting.
I look at your career trajectory, and, I've always been happy with my own career, but I look at yours and I think, man, if I could go back and do it all over again, tie those two things together, music and analytics, it's just so cool.
I didn't even know I was doing it. It just kind of happened. I honestly thought I'm going to be a manager with a corner office managing. Eventually, I'm going to manage Alanis Morissette and Madonna and the All American Rejects, and like everyone's going to want to work with me. Didn't quite turn out that way, but I'm glad it turned out the way it did.
Okay, now you kind of tipped your hand a little bit on the next question. So, what you did before you worked at MTV while you were in college involves one of those bands that you mentioned. So, tell us that story.
Yeah, so I got my undergrad degree at Oklahoma State University, which is in a town called Stillwater, Oklahoma.
A music hotbed,
And
by the way, right?
it wasn't at the time, but I would like to think the band that I worked with helped make that happen.
Yeah.
So it was famous at the time and still for Garth Brooks.
Yep.
In fact, there's a house in Stillwater that says Garth and Sandy lived here, like on the actual roof. It was right by the campus, actually. So yeah, so I had like, as a poor college student, so I had about 7,000 jobs. I had 4 actually. One of which was a bartender. It was a very bad bartender, not good with drinks, but you did want to come to me because I overpoured. So as a bartender,
that's a good bartender in my book.
If you wanted a mixed drink, good luck. I could handle the beer. So it was that. I worked at the health department at the time when there were filing cabinets and files. I was the one that came in at the end of the day and had to file everything. It helped that in high school I also worked in the library, so that was nice. One of my nice TA moments. I also had a job as a radio DJ for the alternative station in Stillwater called The Spy. My friend actually now owns it, but it's in Oklahoma City, which is super cool. That we remain friends. But anyway, I had the overnights, and I was a DJ named Jane Does.
Jane Does.
Jane Does. I'm not even gonna tell you what it means or how I got to it. But what I will tell you is that there was a DJ called Little Buddha. I just call him Buddha. And he said, you know what? I know you want to be a rock star, but if that's not gonna happen, clearly it happened, right? So you should manage bands. You're organized, you're this, you're that, you should do it. And I was like, what's manage bands? And like I said, I was a poor college student. So I went to the library. So for the kids listening, the library is a place that you would go where there were books and magazines and computers.
Old school.
This was before, and I'm totally aging myself, but I think I may have already mentioned my age, but this was before like Google. This was before, streaming, all of that stuff. It was like way back when like people rarely had personal computers in their houses. That's how old I am. Dinosaur. And so I would go to the library and I would read about like music magazines, Rolling Stone, Spin, Hits, they had them. And, I remember one day, I know I make it if I get a subscription to these magazines. But then I would go to the bookstore and learn about like everything you need to know about the music industry and those types of books that I couldn't afford. But I would sit in the aisle and read and literally mark my page, write it in my notebook, my page, and go back every single day. My professor actually jokes around with me about this, but like I was the person you tripped over in the bookstore. So I went back to my DJ friend and I said, okay, I'll manage the band. Who's the band? I didn't even know, right? And there were there are 2 kids, there were 3 kids at the time. And he was like, oh, they're kids, but they have potential. And I was like, okay. So I drove out to one of their houses, still living with their parents. And they were playing. And I remember thinking, oh man, you're such like, Blink-182 could sue you for these songs, which they were original songs, by the way, but you could tell that they were heavily inspired.
Yeah. And
at the time, it was a band called the All American Rejects. And there were 3 of them. Jesse Tabish was the lead singer. He eventually went on to do other things. And then you had Tyson Ritter and Nick Wheeler. Nick at the time was on the drums. Mm-hmm. And he also moonlighted as a guitar instructor. So I was like, you should play guitar. So eventually he came out front and started playing guitar. And Tyson, who was the bass player and had very few songs, but really great pop sensibility, moved him over as the lead vocalist and obvious bass player. And then at the time we would play shows, and we would have like a backing drum track, because there were only two of them. And they were 15 and 17.
Stealing a job from a drummer. Oh.
We eventually got a drummer. But Nick and Tyson became the All American Rejects, and I managed them. I was their publicist, their booking agent. I bought them the van that they later called Big Boobs McGee. Probably not working at this point.
Not so
their
much.
name, their name, not mine. I'm sorry, it's not PC. 15 and 17-year boys, you can understand. And eventually I became a legal guardian of theirs, because in order for them to play in actual bars, they needed a guardian there. And so,
Right.
I had things signed, and we went on the road. We did some weeknights, we did the Thursday night penny beer nights and everything. We were everywhere. And I put them in surrounding areas. We started in the small Stillwater. They became a staple at Mike's College Bar. Started out, you had a handful of fans, and it expanded to where like people couldn't even get into that bar when we actually signed to Doghouse Records.
Cool.
So that was kind of the humble beginnings. And one thing that sticks out, and I forgot about this until you and I talked earlier. We were driving back from Tulsa, and I was kind of asleep in the back of the van, and they were awake driving. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, the van's on fire. And I was like, what? And it was like smoke coming out of the front. And I was like, oh my God, all I could think about was get the equipment out. Like, forget our lives, but let's get the equipment out. I don't know. Like any good manager, was also a tour
Absolutely.
manager, by so literally 3 of us are carrying everything out of the van, and no joke, it goes and explodes in the front.
Oh my
It was
God.
never has happened to me again. It was the wildest thing that happened to me. I have no idea what happened or why it started doing that. I just remember waking up and being like, get out the equipment. So that's a funny memory that I have from those days. But yeah, I managed them from 1999 through the getting them that Doghouse deal. I remember being in bigwig New York offices being like, if you don't believe in the All American Rejects, you don't know music. And now I'm like, who was I? My friend Harry and I joke about that all the time. He loves to tell that story. Like, you're in my office. Like, I signed like the Flaming Lips, and you're like, you don't know music. Sign this band. But yeah, that was a really nice humble beginnings. And I say humble beginnings because they eventually, got a buzz, and, we started talking to major labels and started this little bit of a bidding war. And around that time, Green Day's manager wanted to manage them. So it was like, peace out. Pat Magnarella's in. So, I was brokenhearted for a very, very, very long time. And, now looking back, it was like, I'm so glad that happened, because it taught me so much about business and life. And, things don't work out the way you expect it, and you got to learn how to adjust. And it taught me that.
Wow. That's fascinating. But it also must be, I mean, thinking about some of the seminal decisions that you affected early on that contributed to the eventual success, over 10 million records sold and all that good stuff. It must be gratifying for you, right?
Yeah, it's I'm proud of that work that we did together. It was the stepping stone for my career and for their career. And quite frankly, it's one of those moments in life where people come together in a professional. We were kids. I was a kid too, but to do something creative and great that you believe in. And, it's really interesting. I don't think for the rest of my life, at least professionally, I've ever believed in something to the point where it like manifested. And so that time was fun. It was part of my growing up.
It's so cool. Such a fascinating story. So you mentioned that it taught you a lot about life. Curious to know, what are some of the the biggest lessons that you took from that experience that you applied into your professional career?
Yeah. So I work with data, right? And the interesting part about data, and we'll say kill that experience is this, it's that the data can tell you one thing, but when you're working with brands, when you're working, when I was at Universal, there's a creativity to it as well. So data can take you so far, but you also have to trust that human element to it as well.
Right.
Like any marketing that you do, it's, a consumer isn't just analytical. They have a heart and a pulse, and you got to take into account that. And COVID is a really great example of that, where,
Right.
working in advertising, it's not about what can I sell, what's a price point. It became more about like, we're in this together. And so I think that is a really great example of marrying the two, because yeah, we're still using data to identify and to personalize and create the right messaging at the right time to the right people. And it almost became, more important than ever that to the right audience, the right messaging at the right time. But that's just a really great example of the human element behind the analytical, which has really been a trajectory of my entire career, actually.
Right. Yeah, there aren't a lot of people that can really get that at the level of depth that you've been able to. So that's a great point. So given your unique perspective, and this answer can be COVID related or not, right? I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, what does the future look like for analytics? What's important? What matters?
Here's what I think I've noticed has been a problem. It's been, getting data together is not easy. It takes a lot of money, the right talent, the right infrastructure. So I think in this new world that we're living in data science, machine learning, advanced analytics is going to be more important than ever to build in, to have these technology offsets to create automation, to get people out of reporting and manual work and into that high value work, to be a strategic partner with, our clients or whomever, whether you're client side or your agency side.
Right.
And I think that's really going to be the challenge, because, also you can't just be all data science all the time. COVID, told us we need to be able to relate. But I think, machine learning and data science is going to help us create efficiencies that we never had before. In some ways, back in the day, everything was so manual. And then technology allowed us to be more nimble. And in a lot of ways, we're kind of going back to the beginning to start all over, this evolution of new ways of doing things. And machine learning isn't just about data. It's also about process. It's making a process easier for whether it's an organization, or whether it's, things as simple as testing environments.
Right.
I'm not going to get geeky excited, but that's kind of something that I think about all the time. And I think there's an evolution that's happening right now in the space. And that's, if COVID has taught me anything, it's that I can't tell you in 5 years what's going to happen.
Right.
I don't even know what's happening by June 15th, when allegedly the California economy is going to open up. But what I can say is that from a marketing perspective, we've learned a lot during this time. And, like I said, right audience, right time, right messaging. Right messaging is more important than ever. And, data allows you to understand that. But the creative coming together with that is how you actually have impact.
Yeah, that's great. So I love that point about sort of the technology taking care of a lot of the things that were previously manual, And it feels like maybe there's that promise now where it's freeing up time to do a lot of the heavy thinking, the deep thinking, that makes analytics a whole lot better. So in a way, it's the human component becomes even more important.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah,
Totally.
Cool, awesome. So switching gears a little bit here. So this is a podcast. Undoubtedly, you've participated in
Wait,
podcasts.
it's a podcast?
It is, believe it or not.
I thought we were just having a typical Zoom meeting. What are you talking about?
Surprise.
I love the element of surprise.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. So, okay. So, what are some other media, be it podcasts or something else, that you find enlightening or enjoyable, both either personally or professionally?
So I've been really listening to a friend of mine named Jason Flom. He has this wrongful conviction, and especially with everything going on in the world today, podcast. And if you haven't heard about it, there's so many, I don't know the stats, but people that are wrongfully convicted every day, right? And to listen to his podcast is so enlightening, and I encourage everyone to go do that. That's the one I want to mention. I want to keep it to one.
Okay.
But I like, if he's just a fantastic entrepreneur, like music executive, author, podcaster. Do you call it podcasters? Content creators? Okay.
So. That works.
I want to be, I want the right term here.
Yeah, you know what?
But that's a really cool podcast. And cool in the fact that it's also calling awareness to a problem that we have.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'll make sure to link to that podcast.
Oh, cool.
So people can easily find it when I get this one.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So the all-important question, the one that I have really been waiting for, especially given your background. So you're stranded on a desert island. You have 3 records, only 3, at your disposal of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they, Alisa?
This is harder than any LSAT question, by the way. Oh my goodness. Without a shadow of a doubt, Fleetwood Mac, Rumors.
A classic.
Yep. What comes to mind, I love this album, I go back to it all the time, is Pete Yorn's Music for the Morning After. That's a really good one.
Very nice.
And listen, I am Madonna through and through. So she's my girl. So I will have to say Madonna Like a Virgin.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I've got an awful lot of nostalgia for the old Madonna and MTV days as well. So big fan.
So now my question is, what's yours?
I'm not prepared to answer that question. So
okay, well,
totally
I gotta tell you, a friend of mine said you should always have your top 100 songs or albums or whatever it is. I think we started with songs because we knew albums were too difficult. So let's do songs. So it was like, yeah, I'm going to do a list. So I have a Spotify list and it's at 563. So my goal in life, my goal in life is to whittle it down to 100. So, I mean, people just come out with good music all the time. Like, I mean, Billie Eilish, like, where did she come from? Like, it's like, gosh, yeah. So talented.
Absolutely. Anyway. I couldn't agree more. It's like something completely out of left field, like you've never heard before. So it just changes the music landscape. Kind of like Slayer, Rain and Blood, or, the first Suicidal Tendencies record. So I'm giving some hints to, what my Desert Island disc might be. But
yeah, no, I'm gathering. It's
just,
I'm gathering.
It's just too hard.
It's
to
hard.
And that's why I ask other people.
Songs are just as hard.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, I'm going to take away from this interview that I really need to think about this question more, that I'm asking of others. I need to be ready for the answer myself. But I love the story of your career, Alisa. It's absolutely fascinating. I wish it were my story, I must say. It's just so cool. And I really appreciate you sharing it on the podcast. And next time we chat, I'm going to be digging deep for other stories because I can't get enough of that stuff.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining me on the podcast, Alisa, and rock and roll. All right.
All right. Have a good one.